just to recap, we're discussing about whether ladies can vote or not. And Rabbi Uziel said absolutely, and Rabbi Kook said absolutely not. And Rabbi Kook said, how could it be that, Rabbi Uziel said, how could it be that a lady won't have the right to vote for somebody who's making decisions for her own self, her own life, that she has to listen to this government official who's being elected, so why can't she vote for him? And he said all the arguments that Rav Kook gave, he said they're not halachic arguments, and therefore unless you have a halachic source to ban a lady from voting or from holding office, you just can't do that. In another tshuva, another responsum, we have a different question. The question was whether we're establishing civil courts, not here rabbinic courts. There you can make the argument that to be a rabbi in a rabbinic court, you have to be a rabbi. And Rabbi Uziel is still in the 30s and the 20s and the 10s, wherever he is. Ladies being rabbis was not the topic of discussion for him here. It could be for us, but not necessarily for him. And Rabbi Uziel wants to figure out whether as a civil judge, someone who's elected to office, can she preside over court cases in this new state of Israel that they're founding. So let's see what he says on page 8. In another response, please, somebody.
In another response, Rabbi Uziel offered halachic grounds to allow women to serve as civil judges as long as the community accepted their authority to judge.
So long as it wasn't forced on the community accepted. So it doesn't make a difference who the community accepts. The community has the right to choose their own judges.
He did not personally think it was a good idea for women to serve as judges because of their innately compassionate natures, but he presented the halachic justification for them to be judges.
Let's pause right there. There are two parts of this sentence we were just speaking about. I want to talk about the second half first and the first half second. Rav Uziel has a special line of reasoning, a certain style, like we spoke about this last week, classic to him. And that is, if I cannot forbid something halachically, I can't forbid it halachically. It might sound funny to you, but if I can't legally find a reason for why someone cannot do something, so I can't tell them not to do it. I can suggest not to do it, I can say that maybe I personally would think not to do it, but I can't make a rule unless I have a reason for why I shouldn't force it. That is Rav Uziel's nature. I told you last week about pants. I just wanted to read this to you again. Just Hashem should help me find it. 1 second. Alright, I want to drag you to the laws of tzniut. The laws of
that's good.
Modest clothing.
Okay.
See the cover of this book?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. The reason it looks like this is because this was found in a used bookstore in New York, and it's the last copy that you could possibly buy of this book today. They don't print it anymore. Again, books that aren't popular, they kind of find themselves in the dustbins of Jewish history.
You found in LA and then you got it in...
No, that I'm still working on getting. You know, I said that when Mashiach's going to come, they're going to collect all the Jews from the corners of the world back to Israel. Mm-hmm. But first you have to collect all the rabbis from all the different bookcases and put them back in the same bookshelf.
Yeah.
Censorship is not a good thing. I don't know, maybe it sounds crazy to you, but censorship it's something from the past, it's something that was bad, something that was evil, not something that's good. We have a Talmud here, for example. And in the Talmud, there are very often words, and you see that word doesn't make sense over here. And then you see on the side, the truth is, in Vilna they printed it with this mistake, but it was intentional because the Catholic Church censored the Talmud. They didn't like what the Talmud said, so they replaced the sentence. And on the side it says, and in Yemen or in wherever other country, they didn't have a Catholic Church, so here you have the original text, and it's something totally different. If you open up the Talmud in Sanhedrin, Tractate Sanhedrin, and to page 40, or 43, somewhere around there, you'll find there's a whole chunk of the Talmud missing. It's just gone. It's an empty block in the middle of the page, bottom of the page. And that's a whole piece of Talmud that speaks about Yeshua, about Jesus. And the Catholic Church took it out. And so today that you have a reprinting of the Talmud, you have those who say, oh, we're not going to print it, tradition. Tradition means it's not in there anymore. You know those Jews? I'm sure half of you are them. I'll tell you in a second. But when the Jews came from Sephardic countries where the printing press was not censored by the Catholic Church, so then suddenly you had access to texts that didn't have or if you would go to the Vatican, and you would pull out an ancient copy of the Talmud that was confiscated in some inquisition or pogrom or something else, you'll find that they have the original text over there. And today, Baruch Hashem, on the side of the Talmud, there are those who made it their business to add in notes where there are changes of the text or original words that are missing or things like that.
Why don't they just print it the way it originally was?
Because of those people who are tradition. No. I'll tell you about them in just a second. It's unfortunate, but that's the nature of our history. I'll give you a great example. In the Shulchan Aruch, whenever it speaks about non-Jews, they're called Goyim. No, it's not, like I said before, it's not a derogatory word. Jews are called Goyim also. But when a Jew uses the word Goyim, it means someone who, it means nation. So if a Jew is saying another nation, that's the word Goyim, so it means another nation except for us. The Catholic Church was not so appreciative of the word Goyim. The reason being, they didn't consider themselves to be non-Jews. The Catholic Church, part of its whole thing is that they were the new Jewish people. And therefore they felt that it was not fair to call themselves Goyim. And they changed the word. All the Jewish books printed in Vilna, in Italy, and wherever else it was, were under the censorship of the Catholic Church. And they instead changed the word to Akum. You know what Akum is? It's an acronym. Kochavim v'mazalot. Yeah?
Okay.
Those who worship the stars and the constellations. Meaning? Idol worshippers, pagans, right? Not us Christians who are monotheists and not really.
But it's the Jews that they take to translate.
So why did the Jews do it? Who were these Jews?
Like Shmuel.
Oh, they were. If you look in the Rambam's version of the Shmoneh Esrei, he changes the nusach. Where you say laminim v'lamash the heretics and those who should have no hope, the Rambam writes v'lamashumadim, those who willfully crossed over to another religion and used it against the Jewish people. That's the Rambam's nusach. You had Jews, good Jewish boys, with good Jewish education, who made it their business. The Catholic Church can't read Hebrew. They made it their business to show the Catholic Church what they should censor out of the Talmud or out of the Siddur or out of things like that. And so Baruch Hashem, today we're kind of coming back to the original versions of things. But censorship is something that happens often. By the way, I spoke, most of you are censored people. I'll give you an example. In Aleinu l'Shabech, and everyone knows this, but I'll share it with you anyways. If you look, and if I had the Siddurim in front of you, I would show you. It says Aleinu l'Shabech l'Adon HaKol. There's a prayer we're praising Hashem, and then it has in Ashkenazi Siddurim in parentheses, in Sephardic Siddurim without parentheses, in many Hasidic Siddurim it's not even there. It's not even there, and it says that we bow down to Hashem, but before that it says Shehem mishtachavim lehevel varik. They bow down to emptiness and nothingness. Umitpalalim el Elo Yoshia, they pray to a God who will never answer them. V'anachnu mishtachavim, we pray to the God, we bow down to the God who is going to answer us, is going to save us, and save the whole world, and so on and so forth. That sentence, that they bow down to emptiness and nothingness. I hate gematria. Why? I don't hate it. It's a good idea. You know, sometimes they have nice numbers, they're cute, they add up, fine. But people abuse gematrias.
That's exactly.
And the problem is, now you don't just have Jews abusing gematrias, you have Christians who were Jews that are abusing gematrias, and here's the following. The word, the word varik means emptiness. But rik also means, could mean, rek, empty, also rok, spit. It's the same kind of word. Somehow rik is the same numerical equivalent as the name for Jesus in Hebrew.
What?
He had a really bored, convert to Christianity, was sitting there doing gematrias and his sitters. Oh, look, that matches, right? Gematrias are not, they're not, what do you say? Foolproof. I'll give you a great example. Please never use this in a derogatory term. I'm telling you this in a positive term. Chabad has a famous gematria. What's the famous address of Chabad? 770 Eastern Parkway. It's like, that's the address of the whole world. But 770, I remember the once in time when every code in Chabad of University City was 770. Right? Pretty much you can guess. That's going to be today it's not that, but there's such a time. It's like a famous number for Jewish people. 770 in Gematria, in numerical value, is Beit Mashiach, the house of the Mashiach. Okay, people use that Gematria for whatever they want. The problem is the Gematria of 770 is also a chamor bli dat, a donkey that has no intellect. Meaning, 770 can have nice gematrias. It can also have very derogatory gematrias. So I prefer to say that 770 is the number of a building, and let's not go into gematrias with the name. You can find a nice gematria that matches to your name, a numerical, but I can find some not nice gematrias that will match to your name also. And so, this science it's not even a science, it's just, it helps when you have a nice, thing to say, and I can even prove it to you with a little number. Okay,
sounds like
fine.
statistics.
Our rabbis call it a parperaot lechokhmah. It's like, you have bread and you have dips on the table, hummus. It's like the hummus, It's not the bread, it's not the food, it's just the dip that you dip things into. Why am I sharing this with you? Because in your Sidurim, or most Sidurim, I'm assuming most people here don't pray the Sephardic Nusach, that's either in parentheses or not there. Because this guy said, look, the Jews are saying that Jesus is like spit, he's emptiness, and I'm taking it out of the Sidur. And for a few hundred years at least, the Jewish communities in Europe never said this verse anymore. Because it wasn't in the Sidur, because it was censored out. And then you had this crisis. What happens is when the Jews left Europe. So what happened? They came to America, they came to Israel. In Israel they met Sephardic Jews with Sephardic Sidurim. In America you had people like Art Scroll who, instead of just printing books that were old, they were renewing things, researching things, And they didn't know, should we add it back in? Or should we leave it out? Now why would you not add it in? Tradition. Remember Fiddler on the Roof? There are two kinds of Judaism. There's Judaism that follows the Torah and Judaism that follows Fiddler on the Roof. And there are two very different kinds of Judaism.
But that tradition is like antithetical to Judaism.
That tradition is a traditional Catholic custom. There you go. It's a Catholic tradition, not a Jewish tradition.
It's not
But there you go.
And it commits something that's against us.
I agree with you. What do you do though when you tell somebody, but for 1,000 years my parents didn't say it? But 1,001 years ago, your parents did say it. Until the Catholic Church erased it from the Siddur. And that's why Art Scroll decided we'll put it in parentheses. Because people will have the choice to say it or not to say it. And the rabbis of Ashkenaz suggest that you should say it at least once a year. At least on Yom Kippur. At least on Rosh Hashanah. Use the original term.
Do you remember being in parentheses?
Yeah, it is.
You don't remember because you pray with the Chabad Siddur.
No, maybe
That's right.
It's not.
In the Chabad Siddur, it's not there.
That's what
And the Lubavitcher Rebbe,
I'm going through the whole thing in my
the
mind
Lubavitcher
and I can't find
Rebbe
it.
of blessed memory has in his diaries, not the diary, it's a book he wrote when he was younger, called the Hayom Yom. In there I saw Lubavitcher Rebbe writes that in Lubavitch the tradition was even on Yom Kippur they don't add in these words.
I thought in the Chabad Siddur it was written.
No way.
No.
And what are the words on
It's like the one time the Sephardic Siddur and the Chabad Siddur disagree with each other. It's like that one, you have to have one thing you don't agree
I
on.
have a Sephardic Siddur at home.
What?
What are the words that are removed? I'm lost.
That they bow down to emptiness and nothingness. Nothingness in Hebrew is the same numerical value as Jesus. And so they got angry and took it out of our Siddur. And Elom. Right. So now we are finding that many of our texts have been censored by the Catholic Church. Fine, thank God we're past the Catholic churches. We're in America, we're in Israel, wherever we are. We don't have to deal with these tzarot anymore. But now we have a new kind of censorship. And it's a censorship of people who struggle with classic Jewish ideas. And so they censor it out of Jewish history, or they censor it out of Jewish texts. I'll give you a great example. Did I tell you about the Rambam the other week? Did I mention that to you?
Which?
I don't think I spoke. I think I spoke about Kol about Jewish censorship. There's a beautiful Rambam. It's probably the best script of the Rambam in the world. It's called the Shabsi Rambam, the Frankel Rambam, whatever you call it. There's a very wealthy man named Shabsi Frankel. Shabsi Frankel, I don't know him, don't know who he was, but he left behind a lot of money to pay Torah scholars to sit down and redo the Rambam, make a laser print, add in commentaries, fix mistakes. The Rambam was like his mission, the text of the Rambam. And I this morning I was learning from a Shabsi Rambam. I was in a Dai Yeshurun and they had a copy. The Frankel Rambam, that whole set, this size, it's like $400. Wow. This size, it's like $600. The normal size, which is this, like $900. It's crazy, but that's why I don't have it. I have a little, Rambam in the back. But it's a very, very good copy of the Rambam. And in the back, the special thing about this Rambam was that the Rambam was written a very long time ago. And there have been many commentaries on the Rambam since then. And what they did was in the back they have like collected commentaries from different books that you probably don't own or I don't own because we don't have such an extensive library that they were able to get their hands on, and they typed up those books and put them into the back of the Rambam. It has a very strange thing in that comes. There are some rabbis who were experts in the Rambam that are not quoted in the back of that book. I'll give you a great example. There's a Rabbi Yosef Kapach, or Kafich, depending where you come from. Rabbi Yosef Kapach was one of the giants of Yemen who made Aliyah to Israel, and later served as one of the chief Dayanim in Israel. Rabbi Yosef Kapach came to Israel with manuscripts of the Rambam. Some handwritten from the Rambam, some copied over by students of the Rambam. He was like, his family they were the guarders of the Rambam scripts in Yemen. And he comes to Israel and reprints the Rambam the way the Rambam meant for it to be printed, added in his own notes. In our family we studied from the Rambam, this is what the Rambam meant to say. And if you look in the back of that Frankel Rambam, you won't find Rabbi Yosef Kapach's name once. You think you're putting out the most scholarly work of Rambam? But Rabbi Kapach, who was the world expert of Rambam, his name is not in there. The Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, maybe not half, maybe a third of his writings are written to clarify the text of the Rambam. You look in the back of the Frankel Rambam, you won't find one Lubavitcher Rebbe back there.
How come?
Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik, the Rav from YU. His whole life was the Rambam. He wrote books and books and books, and he's not in the back of the Frankel Rambam. Rav Kook has a commentary on the Rambam, not in the back of the Frankel Rambam. But Satmar Rebbe, he's all over the place. He didn't write a commentary on the Rambam, but he's all over the place on the back of the Rambam. And some other names, and it makes you wonder, what happened here? They decided to censor out certain rabbis from Jewish texts. They don't exist. We don't like them. Rabbi Yosef Kapach, aside from him being Yemenite, he was too controversial for that. He was a Zionist. He was all kinds of... The guys who printed the Frankel Rambam.
Okay.
That team. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, they didn't like Lubavitcher Rebbe, they didn't put him in there either. Suddenly you have a book of Rambam that's missing key commentaries on the Rambam because someone decided, let's take it out. My brother-in-law sent me a picture of a school book. It was like a Hasidic girls' Chumash for like first grade. And in the middle of the Chumash, it has verses that are just missing.
What?
If I didn't see a photocopy, I would not believe it. I wouldn't just believe someone telling me this. I have the copy, it's on my phone somewhere. They WhatsApped it to me. And it's unbelievable. Certain parts of the Torah, maybe the kids shouldn't know this. Maybe the kids Hashem wrote it. Forget the Rav Kapach. Forget it. This is your God, it's not... They felt it was good to censor it out of the Torah. There are, if you look at my back shelf on the bottom, see there's a blue set of books?
Yeah.
That's a set of Zohar with the commentary of a rabbi called Rabbi Ashlag. Rabbi Ashlag was a famous Kabbalist, very controversial but very famous. And when he was publishing his commentary on the Zohar, he was very afraid that it wouldn't be accepted because it was like a new age commentary on the Zohar. Not really, but it was a new style of studying Zohar. And so what do you do when you want people to read your book and you're doing something new? You get haskamot. You go to other rabbis that people know, and you get their approval on your book, on the way that you write. And so he went to two rabbis, Rabbi Kook, the chief Ashkenazi rabbi of Israel, and Rabbi Yosef Chaim Zonefeld, the chief rabbi of Jerusalem, who was also later the anti-Rav Kook leader in Jerusalem. And he got haskamot from both of them. They both agreed to his book. And all the old Zohars, they had both letters of approval in them. Today, if you go and you look in the Zohar, you'll never find a letter from Rav Kook in there. It's out, it's gone, it disappeared. It's an incredible thing. It's an incredible thing.
Why do they do that?
Here's what happens. Because we didn't have the Catholic Church censoring us anymore, so now we have to censor ourselves, because who's going to do it for us? It's like the Jews for 2,000 years, the non-Jews were killing us and they're angry at us. Now we're here. Now we have to kill each other and fight with each other and get angry at each other. That's how we work. That's the way Jews operate.
Actually, I mean, this is a Catholic thing, obviously. There are, and on TV yesterday was a series, I think it is, of the Red Panthers.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw part of it, of Yaakov, and there were things there that Becky and I was like, that's not true. I mean, you said that there were things taken off.
Okay, I'm sure there are people who add also, I'm sure.
And this is some things they added, like Rachel and Leah taking the idols from Laban, carrying with them the idols from Laban.
By the way, in the Torah, the same place where it says, do not take away, it also says, don't add. It's the same thing.
The Red Tent is based on Anita Demans.
Yeah,
the book, The Red Tent, is historical fiction. It's not
it's fiction. But the thing is
historical
that,
fiction.
I mean, I see it as fiction.
Unfortunately,
Fiction.
people that don't know.
historical.
It's fiction that's based in a historical time frame.
So let's go here to this book that I was mentioning to you. Rabbi Chaim David Halevy, for whatever reason.
That is my point.
But the point is well taken, and you're right.
Is that
Just like Rabbi Uziel,
no?
Rabbi Uziel has been, you notice on my bookshelf, I'm guilty as charged. I don't have one book from Rabbi Uziel on my bookshelf. The reason is that it's impossible to find his books. I finally tracked down, last week I wrote an email after the class, I found out there's an institute that publishes Rabbi Uziel's books. They've redone all of his books, and as soon as I get enough money to buy the books and to pay for the shipping, God willing, we'll have a shelf of Rabbi Uziel's books. But until then, we're going
to me that it's just politics. This censorship.
Sure.
It's politics.
Sure.
You rewrite history, like America rewrites history. You rewrite history. You
For example,
change
Rav Kook.
things around.
You know that I love Rav Kook, and I love his son, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook. But Rav Kook and his son, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, were two very different kind of leaders. Rav Kook was a little bit more universal, a little bit more... And I know after reading this article you're not so convinced, right? But Rav Kook's approach to non-Jews was very... Contrary to what this article tells you, was much more warm and open and accepting, and just certain things, certain places his head was willing to take him, that his son very much felt the world shouldn't know about. There are, some say, between 80 and 100 books of Rav Kook that are locked up in key, in original manuscript print, in the yeshiva of Rav Kook in Jerusalem today. That Rav Tzvi Yehuda gave orders these books should not be printed.
Why?
Because he didn't want those ideas to get out to the public.
What were the ideas?
But it's not his right to do that.
But that's
not his right.
That's called censorship. Well, he claims, listen, my father didn't publish them for a reason. There's a famous story not so long ago.
That he wrote them.
Someone snuck into that room and did print one of the books that was in the room. And it's a whole fight in Israel. Was that legal, not legal? They took each other to court. It was a whole thing. Fine. Listen, they've done things like this in the past. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, when he passed away, they emptied out his drawers and printed up everything that he wrote in notes in his drawers. I'm not sure the Lubavitcher Rebbe wanted everyone to know what it said in the notes in his drawers. So that's what Tzvi Yehuda said. I'm not sure that my father wanted you to know exactly what he was thinking.
Then why did you write them?
Because people write things all
if
the
you didn't
time.
want them to know. I disagree.
I don't know. It's very hard.
Don't you write sometimes to yourself some notes just for yourself?
Exactly, and then
Could be
maybe
a
you put it in your
manuscript
drawer, and you want to save it, and you die before you get to throw it out.
There's a famous story about Rabbi Akiva Eger.
100%.
Rabbi Akiva Eger was one of the giants of Lithuania in Europe. And he, one Shabbat, decided that the books he wrote were nonsense. He feels that he just wasn't holy enough to actually write books on Torah. He's not going to print his books like he thought. And he took his manuscripts on Saturday night after Havdalah, and his plan was to throw them into the fireplace. And as legend has it, true, not true, they don't tell stories like that about you or I, right? And 3 people knocked on his door and said, we're angels that have come to tell you that once you as a rabbi write something down, it's no longer yours to burn. Once you write it down, it's now the property of the Jewish people collectively. And if you want to burn it, you have to ask their permission. And he printed his books, and today his books are some of the most brilliant pieces on the Talmud that have ever been written. But it could be that I would say the same thing. He wrote it. At the end of the day, it's our right to know. What can it hurt him now that he's not here? It's not like everybody loves Rav Kook anyway, so what's going to happen? What's going to get worse? Something to think about. Censorship exists, and not just, I'm familiar with the censorship in my community, my rabbinic community, the Orthodox community. I promise you there's censorship everywhere else also. I can only tell you though the things that I'm familiar with. I can't speak about things I'm not familiar with. This book, this rabbi, for whatever reason, has chosen to be put on the back burner of Jewish history. I got my hands on the copy of this book. It cost me $9. It was incredible. I found it. Some guy said, why would you even want it? He sent it to me the next day in the mail. I was like, take it. I can't believe someone's paying for it, right? And I'll read to you exactly what he writes here. This is all to illustrate an example of Rabbi Uziel's way of thought. This rabbi is Rabbi Uziel's primary disciple. He's his student. Rav Chaim David Halevy is the student of Rabbi Uziel. He very often in the notes will say, our master Rav Kook said so and so, because he also studied from Rav Kook, because remember they were chief rabbis at the same time. Said, but my rabbi, Rabbi Uziel, said X or Y or Z. This is under the category of men not wearing ladies' clothing and ladies not wearing men's clothing. Those are both biblical prohibitions, that a man can't dress like a woman and a woman can't dress like a man. Says Rabbi Chaim David Halevy, En isur levishat bigdei ish leisha. There's no prohibition for a man to wear a woman's clothing. Ela davka b'dvarim asurim loy b'kishut. Rather, the only prohibition is things that are men or women wear to beautify themselves or to show something about themselves, to decorate themselves. For example, jewelry or certain kind of stylish clothing. Or some would say that a sword, men used to carry around these, in the older days they had like swords. They didn't actually kill people, that was like a status thing, Today you have people that have their phones stuck to their belt and it sticks out. It's like a status thing, look at my phone, right? That's what everyone's doing. But in his opinion, he says that clothing that is not made for decoration or they're for beautification, there's no prohibition to wear them. And even clothing that was made to decorate or to beautify. אין איסור אלא באישה לובשת בגדי איש לדמות האיש, אבל אם לובשת כדי להגן פני החמה בימות החמה ופני הגשמים בימות הגשמים, אין שם איסור. Says Rabbi Chaim David Halevy, even if I were to take clothing that's specifically for a man, I'll give you an example. You're married to a Hasidic rabbi, and he wears a black coat that ladies don't wear. You know what I'm talking about? It's a long coat. You can't wear that coat because it's made specifically for a man to look like a man in a certain community. But what if it's cold and you're walking back home from some dinner on a Friday night and you didn't wear a coat because you thought it was San Diego, why do I need a coat? And he happens to be wearing a coat that they probably wore in Siberia, that's why he's wearing it. And he says, listen, you're cold, I don't really need the coat. Why don't you take my coat and wear it? Is she allowed to do that?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. I've seen it happen.
Absolutely, says Rabbi Uziel, because here it's not violating the prohibition of, she's not trying to dress up like a man, she's trying to stay warm, that's absolutely okay. Then he says, Beged shederech lelovsho anashim v'nashim mutarim kulam lelovsho. If there's a certain kind of clothing that both men and women wear it, anyone can wear it. Then lachmir bezeh afilu chasidim v'anshei maaseh. Even extra holy people shouldn't be strict about this. And then he says, V'af she'ish, and even if a man makes it li'imo, for himself, mutar li'isha lavsho, a lady can wear it, because it's the same clothing that, for example, a bathrobe. They have bathrobes. People sometimes share them. A husband and a wife, or kids, or a family, whatever it is. There's no, the man's bathrobe, the woman's bathrobe, it's the same bathrobe, you could wear whatever one you want. Slippers, you have slippers one, I guess that's not so practical because of sizes, but technically that would be okay. Certain things that are just unisex clothing. And then he says the following thing, which is why I'm dragging you to the laws of tzniut. You have to bear with me.
I love it.
We go on tangents, but they'll come back somewhere. Mitoch shtei halachot anal. From both of these halachot, התברר היתרם של מכנסיים שנהגו אנשים ללבוש בזמננו. From both of the reasons above, it's now clear why today ladies have the custom to wear pants, and it's okay. והכוונה להגן מצינה בימות הגשמים, especially when it's the intention is to be wearing it in cold weather to stay warm, or from rain, or for whatever reason. Skirt's cold, I don't know, I've never wear a skirt. ובייחוד שצורתם שונה לגמרי משמכנסי גברים, and especially since a lady's clothing pants don't at all look the same as a man's pants.
Thank you.
It could be that if a man were to wear a lady's pants, then he'd actually be violating a prohibition of wearing a lady's clothing.
That's correct.
וכל שכן, and how much more so שאין כוונתן כלל להידמות לגברים, they don't have any intention to try to look like men, וניכרות הן ביתר תלבושתן, and therefore you could tell from the rest of their clothing that they're a lady, not that they're a man. זאת ועוד, and listen furthermore, הרי לובשות הן מעיד חורף בצאתן לרחוב, ועיני היטב בהרה, he says go look below, he has different things to say down below.
Does Rabbi Kook agree with him, or do you have a different opinion about this?
I want to read the next note and then I'll... Upashut, says Rav Chaim David Halevy. Don't get so excited. Upashut שכל זה הוא באותם מכנסיים שגזרתם מוכיחה שלא לשם שחצנות באו. This is obviously only about pants that are not built in a way to look provocative. אבל אותם מכנסי שחץ, but those pants they're supposed to look provocative, to call attention. ודאי שאין להם שום היתר, לא משום איסור להקריב האישה, אלא משום פריצות. וכל הלבש... Okay, I don't need to read the rest. He says that the pants have to be modest pants. They can't be short shorts. Even for a man, you can't wear them, right? You have to have a certain head on your shoulders when you decide what clothing to wear. It could be even with skirts. It could be with for men with their shirts. It could be with all kinds of things. It could be. People have to think about what it's actually bringing across. And then he says at the end the following. And this is why I brought you here. But I have to tell you truthfully, in my opinion, is that this is not the way that modest people should dress. It would be most proper if ladies would wear skirts that would cover their knees. By the way, this book of halachot is written for ladies. That's why he's talking so much about ladies. It's not his obsession with it. It's an entire book of halachot written for girls. They asked him to write it in their school, and he wrote a book for them. He says, even though I say that it's not modest, he said, but ein mikoach halacha, but I don't have a halachic strength or authority to completely say that pants are not allowed to be worn. Especially when the choice is between a short skirt that's provocative and pants that are not at all provocative, I would choose between pants and a short skirt. I would choose pants. Correct. And it takes a smart person to know how to stay away from things which are bad. Now, in the world that I'm familiar with, this would be reason enough that this book looks the way it does and is in a used bookstore, right? This thing that he wrote here. I didn't come to talk to you about pants. That is not my point, it's not my intention. I don't care.
But I'm happy you do.
And I'll recap. Those who wear pants have on whom to rely so long as they're modest. Those who decide they don't want to wear pants, that's the way Jewish ladies have been dressing forever and ever and ever. And it's something that has value, like Rabbi Uziel is saying. But that's not the point. The point is here that he says, I have to be honest with you that this is permitted halachically according to the letter of the law. Personally, what does he say?
He doesn't want to.
I wouldn't suggest it, but can I prohibit it?
No.
It says, I don't have the strength or the power halachically to say that it's forbidden. This is what we call in English intellectual honesty. Something which is lacking very much in the world today.
It's an interpretation, because he took the words of the Torah and decided to...
Everything in the world is interpretation. Even the way you read the Torah is going to be interpretation. So I know people say, oh, the Torah says. The Torah doesn't say anything. The Torah says whatever it is that...
Wear men's clothing.
Right, so according to that, it's even better. According to that, if it's a lady's pants, then what's the problem? The Torah doesn't say a lady can't wear pants. The Torah says a lady can't wear a man's clothing. In which case, if these are pants made...
to wear robes. I mean,
The whole thing is subject to interpretation. Again, I didn't. My wife wears skirts. I'm happy. I hope my daughter is going to wear. I'm telling you here, though, what I'm focusing on is this intellectual honesty here. When you say I cannot prohibit something halachically, I'm suggesting you do this, but I don't have the koach ha'ilchati, that's halachic strength. If you ask me if I can have pig on Yom Kippur, I'd say no. There's no way to beat around that bush. Whatever you want to interpret things, right?
You can't eat ever
on Yom Kippur. Okay.
Not on Yom Kippur, ever.
What about the Jewish men who live in Scotland that have to wear the kilts?
He writes about it over here. He said that actually that's considered men's clothing. Everything is based on societal norms here. That's something which, by the way,
India
you brought up a good point. Just like over there, men would be wearing kilts, and those are not skirts. They're just, for us Americans who don't have any culture, they look the same, right? The same would be true for a person who lives. Let's say you moved right now to Borough Park.
Also in India.
Let's say you moved to Borough Park, and all the ladies wear skirts. the societal norm there would then be, halachically, that you would also have to wear a skirt. The reason being, because that's just like a kilt is okay over there. Here, pants are no longer okay because an entire community
I
accepted
can
something.
attest to that. I had to stand in my face at Barakah.
Outside of Israel, outside of these communities, really, you don't have one agreed upon societal norm, which is why this whole discussion is moot. But what I wanted to bring up was this point. And this is what Rabbi Uziel is doing here. He says, you have to know, personally, I don't think it's a good idea for ladies to be judges. Back to page 8. He says, but I cannot tell you why halachically it's not allowed, and even more than that, I will set up the case for you that it is okay. I just don't think so. Now, we're going to get to the second. I remember I said we're going to do the second part first, the first part second. This is not the way you're supposed to do things, ever. Remember, Eliezer comes to who by the well?
To
Rivka, yeah? And what does Rashi say there? How did he know she was special?
She asked him if he needed help.
Yeah, but tell me better. Rashi says something there. She answered his first question first and his second question second. So that's how you know somebody's a good shidduch? Come on, that's a ridiculous thing. So you don't understand that order, when you have order in your mind, order in your head, order, you know that someone asks you this question, answer this question first, then that question. Don't jump around. That shows a certain personality that's thought out, that's well thought out, that's planned out. That's a good personality to think about. The same thing here. I normally don't go out of order, but we had to go out of order here. Rabbi Uziel is being very honest. He's saying, I don't think it's a good idea, but I can't say no. Rabbi Kook, I don't know that he had an opinion regarding ladies wearing pants. My assumption is he'd say no way in the world. My assumption. Like most rabbis. The thought process though here is that Rabbi Kook would probably also give it to you that there is the opinion of Rabbi Chaim David Halevy. He would tell you that. Now, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, by the way, has adopted this position as well. This is not a lone opinion. If you open up Chacham Ovadia's book, he does mention the same opinion, though a little bit more conservatively than Rabbi Chaim David Halevy does. And he got himself in a lot of trouble for it. But that's his modus operandi. He was always getting himself in trouble with people. Rav Kook had a big problem once upon a time with his counterparts in Jerusalem, the other Ashkenazi rabbinate who didn't appreciate his authority. He told them something very interesting, which is something to think about. He said, when you don't tell people the whole truth, you just tell them what you need them to hear. He said, what you're telling them is, I don't trust you. He said, when you tell someone I don't trust you, they're not going to trust you either. He said, and you think that you're enhancing the Torah's authority when you only give them one thing to choose from? Says Rav Kook, you're actually going to lose out because the community will reject you entirely. And then you won't have any authority. Those words cannot be any truer than they are, and they should be said all over the place today. You have to know, do you trust people? If you don't trust, if I didn't trust you, I wouldn't share with you half the things I share here. But I trust you. There are times where I speak in places that I probably shouldn't be speaking, where I should be more careful about what I say. I give a class, and someone comes from out of town and stays there for Shabbat, and so I get a phone call from someone, oh, we heard you said, I don't even know who you are. What are you saying? You heard? This guy came. He doesn't know the way I speak. He doesn't know the way I think it. He told somebody else, oh, this rabbi in San Diego said X, Y, and Z, and then you get it over the head. That's okay. That teaches you that you can't trust everyone. But when someone's your teacher, when someone's your rabbi, you have to say, I expect the truth. I expect that you treat me like I'm an adult that knows how to handle the truth. When I was starting this kollel at night for men, at the beginning someone came to me and said, you're giving us too many choices, too many opinions, too many things. It's a very interesting style, he told me. He said, let me tell you what the style is. He said, just because you don't know how to read and translate Hebrew, and that's what I'm doing at the kollel, helping you break your teeth on classic Jewish texts in Hebrew, doesn't make you stupid. It doesn't make you lacking of intelligence. If anything, you're a doctor, and this one's a lawyer, and this one has a full-time job, this one has 2 college degrees, and everyone there has something to say for themselves. I said, so why is it that you should be taught Torah as if you're in 3rd grade? It's not fair. But every time you're going to go to a class, so they're going to teach you like you're in 1st grade? And the worst part is that you're okay with that. Yeah. The worst part is I'm the one who's deviating from the style. And that's something that I think about very often. We have to make sure that we're intellectually honest with people. And people then know how to choose. They know how to make their own decisions. And if they don't, so no matter what you would say, it wouldn't change their mind. So you have to be fair with people. Rabbi Uziel is doing this with us. And he sets up a case that ladies can be appointed as civil judges. Now talk to me about the second half of what he has to say. Why doesn't he want ladies to be judges? ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהכל נהיה בדברו.
Amen. Because they have too compassionate a nature.
Some people are going to nod their head, and some people are boiling inside since the first time they read it. Talk. Agree, disagree. What do you have to say about that? So what?
I think some women do have very compassionate nature, but there are plenty of women who don't.
But it's like men also like that.
Exactly.
I think if you just look at it, the American court system, and you see how many female judges, I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, on the Supreme Court of the United States of America, a Jewish woman, hello,
But is she more compassionate than...
No, I know. Well, she's known for being a liberal. Does being a liberal mean you're more compassionate? No, it's an orientation. It's like Uziel versus Cook, So, it doesn't make my blood boil or anything. I mean, life has proven...
kind of study that a woman should have, to become a judge, but it would be the same because it's the same requirement.
Okay. So what you're saying is something that needs to be said. It's obvious though what you're saying, but it needs to be said. Obviously, you're talking here about someone who's just as competent as a male counterpart. You're not just saying, "Oh, we're going to choose a random lady and make her good." You have to obviously have the same. No, that's a given. There's qualifications that everyone has to have. The question now is, if someone has the qualifications, can it happen though that she'll be a judge? Rabbi Kook says no way. For the same reason I said before, which he felt that ladies halachically don't have the ability to be in a position of authority.
That's not true.
That's what Rav Kook felt, right? That's what Rav Uziel.
Did he study psychology, this man?
It doesn't mean he didn't say they're not competent.
That was his opinion.
He said that's what the halachic sources are telling him. That's what he felt. Again, it's an interpretation, but that's what his interpretation was. And he can be commended for as much as he was considered a liberal on certain things where he felt that he was going to be a conservative, and he felt that's what his heart was telling him. So he was a conservative, and that's why people believed him.
It wasn't because of other responsibilities like having babies and not being available at any.
It could be a variety of reasons. It could, there.
It doesn't explain one.
Is my wife here?
Yeah.
No, she in the room? No. There's a famous question. I think it's about the prophetess Dvorah, but I don't remember. I think she was at the same time. Who was the male prophet when she was alive?
ברק בן אבינועם.
ברק בן אבינועם.
זה היה.
שר צבא.
כן, אבל לא היה זה שלה. והייתה אשת דבורה.
אז חולדה יכול להיות שהייתה בתקופת יחזקאל?
יכול להיות.
One of them overlapped. Huldah overlapped with Yechezkel, or my wife will know. She's my expert. Anyway, there was a time in the Tanakh where there was a female prophet and a female prophetess and a male prophet. And there was a certain person who went to get his dream interpreted, and he went specifically to the female interpreter, the prophetess, and not to the male prophet. And they said, why would you choose her over him? That's the more traditional position of prophet. And he said because ladies have a better personality.
There she is.
Deborah?
Yes.
We need you.
Yes.
Which prophetess overlapped with a male prophet? Remember there was a story why he went to her and not to him? Huldah, right? And Yechezkel, who was it? Yirmiyahu. Okay, Baruch Hashem. See? That's why you have a rabbinit. So, Huldah, ironically...
you learn you should always listen to the women.
So now, just in honor of that comment, I'll translate her name. Huldah is the name Weasel. That wasn't her real name, but they nicknamed her a Weasel because of her personality. So it's okay, we can... And then he chose to go to Huldah.
After having 6 kids.
She was one of the big tzadikot, a righteous lady. And he said, why did you go to her? Because she's more compassionate. And when you interpret someone's dreams, the outcome of the dream is dependent on the person interpreting it. And so if the person interprets the dream for bad, it will be a bad thing. If they interpret it for good, it will be a good thing. So I don't trust the man to be compassionate. I went to the lady instead. That was what it says in the Tanakh. There is such an idea. Such an idea that if you had to choose between a mother and a father who's going to do a better job at being compassionate and raising the child, then you're going to have exceptions to every rule. Every rule has exceptions. But more likely, children feel a lot of love from their mothers and sometimes not so much from their fathers. It could be that society tells men not to love or whatever it is. Baruch Hashem, we don't suffer from these things, but there are such things in the world. I spoke to a guy who told me his father never hugged him. His whole life, he never hugged him. He said, I grew up in a real American home. So first off, I don't know that there is such a thing as a real American home because there are many kinds of people in this country. Yeah, but that's what he told me. I was speaking to him somewhere. That's what he shared with me. Rabbi Uziel said, therefore, in my opinion, to be a judge, you have to be very cold, very judgmental.
Could it be, Rabbi, that, for what I understand, because I'm not a man, men are more able to compartmentalize and separate things, and women we put like everything together?
You mean cold?
Objective.
Like you can, like sometimes you can separate.
Again, like we said, everything is a stereotype. So don't tell her it's a stereotype. Everything is a stereotype. Everything we're going to say now is a generalization. It's a stereotype.
Yeah.
Could be. It could be. And I heard this from ladies, not from men. You suggested it, not me.
I've heard it. I don't know.
Sometimes ladies, they say they have minds like Rabbi Akiva. They go all over the place. A man, he can't think about more than one thing at the same time.
Yeah, correct.
Sometimes, though, I'll give you a great example. I was teaching the laws of a certain area of halakha to somebody. For example, if you eat pig and cheese together, are you violating the prohibition of do not mix meat and milk? No. And I was teaching this to a group of seminary girls. They said, but Rabbi, you can't eat pigs. I said, you're not understanding the question. The question here is, if I were to eat it, would I be violating the prohibition of eating meat and milk together? I said, but you can't eat it. Here's the thing. Very often our rabbis will ask a question. Obviously you can't have a pig. Everyone knows you can't have a pig. The whole point here is not to figure out whether or not you can have a pig, but rather, when it says you cannot have meat and milk, is it only kosher meat and kosher milk, or is it also not kosher meat and not kosher milk? Now for you this might sound like splitting a hair, but there are some people who refuse to disconnect certain things. But that could also be a man. Like we said, remember what Rabbi Uziel said before? He said here, I want to read this to you. You know what I'm talking about, I'll show it to you. Oh, in page 7, in the middle paragraph on the right hand side. Some opponents of women's suffrage suggested that women's understanding was limited and they were not competent to vote. To this, Rabbi Uziel noted that many men had limited understanding. Should they too be deprived of the right to vote? No. That's what Rabbi Uziel believes. That's his worldview. I can give you a great example. Vori, can I embarrass you?
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes things will happen at shul.
First, give the example. See if it's great.
No, you might not feel embarrassed. Maybe I'll come out feeling like a fool. Sometimes things happen at shul. Things happen in the community. I hear about things going on in San Diego, and people come to an opinion, and there are certain things that I have a zero tolerance policy about. I'm a hardliner about them. And I'll come on and say, this one, he da-da-da-da-da. And she'll say, Yoni, why do you have to look at it that way? Maybe it really wasn't so bad. Maybe it's not really And every time I come, like I'm on this high horse, it's just, Yoni, don't get so worked up. And the truth is that she's right, and I'm also right. But her nature is that whenever she'll hear someone saying something bad about someone, she'll always turn it around so really the person did something good. Now that's a great character trait to have when you're judging people favorably. But when you have to judge people not favorably, you have to judge people. You have to put one guy in prison and put the other guy in. You can't judge him favorably. You have to be able to say, I know this is going to ruin his life. I know this is going to take away every penny he owns. I know, but this is what we have to do because that's the law, this is the decision, this is the rule. That, says Rabbi Uziel, I personally don't think that ladies are so great at making decisions that are going to ruin other people's lives.
I think I once heard a great speaker say that the difference between men and women's brains are men are waffles and women are spaghetti. Where men have compartments. So you open one file and it fits here. And then, let's take a normal conversation. Talk about the mother-in-law, so you open one file cabinet.
Why don't you have to about the mother-in-law?
Because you're not talking about good example. Then you open another file cabinet because you're speaking about work. And they open a third file cabinet because you just spoke about the house being messy. And then the fourth cabinet you spoke about the kids. And by the time you reach 10 different topics, the man's brain is ready to explode. Right? Because you just opened a whole bunch of different compartments. Whereas if you talk to ladies, you spoke about the mother-in-law, and that connected immediately to work because there was an emotional attachment. Then that brought you flowing into the next conversation, which brought you... And that intuition helps us. Because we don't see things two-dimensionally. We see things from every angle. We can interpret things differently. We saw something... And again, when you say masculine and feminine, you can have a lady who is completely masculine. And you could have a man who's completely feminine. But trait-wise, right?
Which, by the way, the Talmud would suggest then that ladies have what's called binah.
Right, which is
Bina is this ability to connect things. It's an ability to see things in a larger picture, not in tunnel vision.
Which doesn't help us when it comes to judgment, though, because you need right and wrong, black and white. Not, I understand why you murdered. It doesn't help you. He's still a murderer.
Right.
We need to figure out what to do with him, and that we're not necessarily as good at. Now, again, not necessarily meaning you're always going to have the exceptions where you're going to find women who have very dominant male personalities, masculine, not male, and you'll have men who you'll find are very feminine. And it's an interesting cross where sometimes and I grew up, I was allowed to be a tomboy. Nobody thought there was a problem with that. Today we live in a world where if you do certain things, you automatically need to be either one or the other. And I think that oftentimes breaks off into, then you can't be who you want to be without having to.
You see that new crib in the box? You know who's going to be putting it together? It's not me. So, Rav Shlomo Aviner has a piece about this in which he suggests that, like I mentioned this last week.
It's a crib.
Rav Shlomo Aviner suggests that there are ladies who fit into the Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah model, those who ran the world but from inside of their tent, and then the Dvorah, Hulda model, Miriam and Neviah, he puts in the category, the ladies who ran the world but from outside of the tent. And he says that just like there are both, he feels the majority is like the Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, and you shouldn't force anyone into either category. But you should be aware that there will always be the exception and there will always be the rule, and both are okay. That's what Rav Aviner suggests. Okay, it's interesting to think about. Rabbi Uziel says at the end of the day, let's say you can find a lady who's competent to judge. Everyone agrees they want her to be the judge. She has the qualifications to be a judge. Why should she not be the judge? Okay. That's answering your question. Let's read the last paragraph. This will put a sad ending. No, it's a good ending, but it'll be a sad because we're ending to this packet. In presenting
the opinion and decisions of Rabbi Kook and Rabbi Uziel, it has not been our purpose to determine who's right or who's wrong, or if both are right. Elul ve'elul divrei Elokim hayim. Both positions are acceptable in the eyes of Hashem. Rather, it has been our purpose to illustrate the interrelationship between hashkafa and halacha. The philosophy and worldview of a posek are not only reflected in halachic decisions, they help shape those halachic decisions.
Sometimes people get disappointed when they see that a rabbinic leader, a lay leader, makes a decision. How can they say such a thing? They said such a thing because they are a certain personality that believes in a certain thing, that lives in a certain world that's very different than you. So obviously they will say something that's very different than the way you think. Which is why when you're looking for someone to be your role model or your teacher or your rabbi or whatever it is, you have to find someone who's somewhere on the same page as you, not just halachically. Halachically there's no such thing as the same page, there's one Torah. But hashkafically, where they fit in their worldview is inevitably where they're going to be led in their halachic rulings, in their halachic decisions.
I find it interesting that Rabbi Uziel's philosophy, hashkafa, seems jives much more with current or modern sensibilities.
Right, and they weren't. This was my point in the beginning, and that's great what you just said. These were not modern ideas.
I understand. I'm just saying that it turns out his view, whether it's a Sephardic view or his personal philosophy, seems to fit much more with, let's say, current.
This worldview was the prevalent worldview of Sephardic Jewish leadership. It doesn't mean, like we said, there were not Sephardic rabbis who were more fanatic than anyone else in the world. It also doesn't mean that there were not Ashkenazi rabbis who were on the same page with Rabbi Uziel. What it means, though, is that Rabbi Uziel didn't view himself as being so revolutionary. He viewed himself as simply continuing the traditions that he had from his rabbis and his parents and his families, and this is the Judaism he was pushing forward, and he wasn't apologizing to anybody for it. If anything, he was making them apologize to him for it, but not the other way around. This worldview fits in today very, very much. And when I look at the various Jewish options that are on the table, I think different worldviews have helped out in different places. Again, my wife and I are going to disagree here. I believe that in a world where Kabbalah was and could be still is like a hot topic, it's a raging issue, So probably that's where Hasidim step into the play and say, listen, we've got this non-dry, this very Kabbalistic, this very mystical, this very spiritual part of Judaism that we need to share. For example, Rav Shlomo Carlebach. I don't consider Hasidim today to really be Hasidim. Rav Shlomo Carlebach was as pretty close to Hasid as you can get. And Rav Shlomo Carlebach, his whole Torah it just fit. It just fit with that spiritual, seeking, yearning soul. I'll tell you the truth is, Rav Shlomo Carlebach, I'm a big fan of. I have some of his books in my back shelf. Rav Shlomo Carlebach almost never mentioned Sephardic sources. Rav Shlomo Carlebach, all of his stories about this Rebbe and that Rebbe and this tzaddik and that tzaddik, no Sephardic stories. There's one story that I know of.
He didn't know.
He didn't know.
Okay, I'm not being angry at him. What I'm sharing with you is, and if you would look at Rav Shlomo Carlebach, as open-minded and as liberal as he was, happened to be a die-hard conservative on certain issues because he was perpetuating a Hasidic worldview, which, with all of its spirituality and love and passion, is very restrictive and very closed-minded.
It's the same thing about Rabbi Kook, because he was liberal.
Absolutely. And what I'm showing you, this hashkafa directly correlates with the areas of halakha. Ironically, the Sfaradim, who are considered much more conservative, everything's, we're pretty black and white on certain issues. Perhaps because of that rigid structure, we're not afraid to break out. The rabbis were not afraid to break out and come up with different ideas, with opening up doors a little bit. They weren't running away from a reform movement. They weren't fearing an enlightenment movement. They weren't afraid of the Catholic Church censoring them. They just really didn't have fears. And that led to a certain openness that unfortunately was lost when the Jewish people joined together. That was a great thing, the Jewish people joined together, but this flavor was lost. Rabbi Uziel's flavor was lost. When I look at the world today, and I say from all the books, and all the leaders, and all the ways of life, that are valid Jewish options, he's getting really excited.
Yes, you're right.
All the ways of life.
He's looking at you like...
From all the ways of life that are valid Jewish options, I don't view the Sephardic way of life to be perfect. I have my own struggles, and that's for other classes. God willing, in this book I'm working on I'm writing in my notes now on my phone. Some of those things are in there. My struggles with the Sephardic worldview. But overall, there's a lot that needs to be taken out of this worldview and applied today, and brought back today very quickly before people just run away from the Judaism that's being presented on the streets today.
I agree.
And that was the point of bringing forward this book.
I think even more than that, we've often discussed that a lot of the Judaism that we have today is reactive. Reactions to things that were. And we're not fighting those battles, but we somehow are still using those techniques. And it worked yesterday, but today it's already a problem. And part of being cohesive is being able to pull out the things that work and weed out the things that we don't need anymore. We don't need them, so we're so afraid of getting rid of things. But it's not getting rid as much as just going back to the source. Let's go back to the source before we needed the solution to the problem.
Last night we were watching a movie. Not a movie. A video. Of Mordechai Eliyahu, the chief Sephardic rabbi of Israel, passed away. Mordechai Eliyahu was a Kabbalist. As much as the chief rabbi was also a Kabbalist. And he lit his Chanukiah in this tradition. You put it on YouTube. Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, Chanukah, you'll find the video. And he lights the blessings. Maybe it took him 10 minutes to say the blessings on the Chanukiah. Why? Baruch. Flipping pages. Seeing different names of Hashem in different shapes. I once prayed with Kabbalah. It takes them forever till they finish tefillah. Friday night, 3.5 hours for Maariv. Not for Mincha, not including. 3.5 hours. That's what they pray. That's their thing. They're not singing and dancing. They're focusing on different things. So then people talk to me like, oh, we studied Kabbalah somewhere. Yeah, the real Kabbalists in Yerushalayim, these are people that are they're like just short of flying on magic carpets. So Rav Mordechai Eliyahu is saying the brachot, and then there's a custom in Kabbalistic tradition to say the Tehillim Yoshev B'Seter Elyon 7 times, right? 7 times. And Rav Mordechai Eliyahu's custom was to give it out to one of the respectable people. Every person, he says the first one, someone else the second one, someone else is the third one. This is not just his custom. Many people have the custom. And in most Hasidic and Sephardic communities, they say this Tehillim 7 times. But Rav Mordechai Eliyahu had a special thing at his house, what he did. There's a full group of people that are in his house. So it's not people from the synagogue, people from the community, people from the chief rabbinate. He says the first one out loud, and his wife says the second one out loud. and then someone else, the next rabbi says the third one. And for me, that's not surprising. It's not surprising that the rabbi's wife would be leading a service publicly inside of the house. It's not a surprising thing for me. But I remember when we first watched it, I said, whoa, his wife is going to lead the Tehillim now in front of the men? And the truth is that with all of the open-mindedness that exists in other movements, that would never happen. Or it would happen, but it would be perceived as an act of rebellion. Whereas in this worldview, it's not rebellious. It's just a natural fit in life that the husband will say one, and the wife will say the next one. And what's the big deal? Why do you write articles about it? Why are you writing books about it? Just do it. That's the way Jews live their life. It's a wholesome Jewish experience. But I thought we have a few minutes that I'd balance it out for you. Been pushing this Sephardic agenda over here. I could take you back to some Ashkenazi places. Rav Shlomo Aviner makes a list of ladies that were famous rabbinic personalities in their time. He's missing a few, which is why I have this book underneath. But I'll read to you. Aside from the prophetesses and the 7 prophetesses and all that. There was a famous Rabbi Elimelech of Lezhensk. You've heard of him before? The Noam Elimelech? Rav Elimelech of Lezhensk, the Baal Noam Elimelech, he had a daughter named Mirush. Mirush held court in Lezhensk and had people come get brachas from her, and she would publicly deliver divrei Torah to people. Fega, the granddaughter of the Baal Shem Tov, the mother of the sister of Rav Baruch, the mother of Rav Nachman. If you ever read Rav Nachman of Breslov, his name is Rav Nachman ben Fega. They said, but why don't you go by your father's name? He said, because all of my holiness comes from my mother. That's what he was famous for saying. Rav Nachman ben Fega. Fega in Yiddish was called Fegele the Neviesa, the prophetess, like a little bit of a prophetess. When he was born, Rabbi Nachman, she would take him every day to the Baal Shem Tov's grave and put him on the grave and take him home to get a blessing from her grandfather, so to speak. And his brit, she turned to her brother Rav Baruch and said, I see in my prophecy that many people are going to fight against Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. Can you give him a blessing that people won't fight with him? They won't make his life miserable. And Rav Baruch said he can't, because that's how it's going to be. But you should name him Nachman. In the words of Nachamu Ami, he'll come and comfort the people. That's his purpose. And if you ever go to a prison in Israel or a drug rehab place in Israel, with all the pluses and minuses of the Breslov Hasidic movement, you'll find people who are in love with the teachings of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, because he was that Rebbe that brought a lot of hope to people who were in very dark, low places. So
The Narrow Bridge was a really good book about him.
His mother, Fega, she had Ruach HaKodesh, and people would come and ask her for things in her Ruach HaKodesh. Freda, the daughter of the Balatanya, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, she learned Chassidut from her father, and she was the teacher of Chassidut. Yeah, you don't like this one? What happened?
No, he likes me, cheering you on.
She was the primary teacher. If you're Lubavitch, you'll know the names better than me. She was the primary teacher of Chassidut to the Mittler Rebbe of Lubavitch. Was the daughter of the first Lubavitch Rebbe. And she left behind many handwritten essays and Chassidut, Ma'amarim, Sichot, that she left behind, original Chassidic thought. Chana Chava was the daughter of the Chernobyl Rebbe. And many Chassidim and also Rebbes would come to her to study Musar, Chassidut, and Kabbalah. Where are you hearing all this? It's all from your camp, not from my world. Adel. Adel or Idol?
Which one?
Where are you from?
Aleph, Yud, Dalet, Lamed. Adel. Adel, the daughter of the Rebbe Rav Shalom Rokach of Belz, she acted like a Rebbe. She held court like a Rebbe, as did Malka, the daughter of the Trisker Rebbe, the Trisker Maggid. Chana Rachel, this is the one we spoke about last week, the maidel of Ludmir, I mentioned to you last week. So she had a different ending, but she also had the same story.
If there were so many women that did so many things, why are they so down on us today?
I'm not done reading my list.
Maybe those women were psychic, highly intuitive.
I'm not.
Yeah, but there are women today that can be just as powerful.
I'm not done reading my list. We had Miriam,
Not more.
the daughter of Rav Shlomo Shapira. She's mentioned in a book called the Tshut Maharshal. The Maharshal was one of the giants of Ashkenaz. His name was Rabbi Shlomo Luria. He was family with Rav Yitzchak Luria, who became Sephardic and lived in Tzfat. Right? He writes in the following: Harabbanit Marat Miriam Nishmat Eden. The Rabbanit, our master Marat, our master Miriam, Tafsa Yeshiva Kama Yamim V'Shanim. She ran the yeshiva for years and days. V'Yeshva Ba'al. She sat in a tent. V'Ilon Lefanash, had a curtain in front of her.
Oh yes.
V'Amra Halacha Lifnei Bachurim Muflagim. And she taught Halacha to the Bachurim Muflagim, to the brightest students in the yeshiva. The daughter of Rav Shmuel ben Eli, the Rosh Yeshiva of Baghdad. This is Sephardic. In Baghdad, there was a rabbi of Shmuel ben Eli, and they write about her. He hayta bekiya b'talmud u'melamedet b'bachurim v'hi sgura b'vinyan derech chalon echad v'talmidim b'chutz v'lamata v'einam roim ota. She would have a special window with the balcony. She would sit there and nobody could see her. And down below were all the students, and she would teach them Talmud. She would teach them Gemara. This is in Baghdad.
What surprises me more is that, like in girls' schools and stuff like this, they never mention these women. It's never it's always all the rabbis.
I have two more names to read to you, and then I'm going to take everything that we're saying right now. Chana, the granddaughter of Rashi, was a famous teacher in France, as well as Dulca, I don't know how to say his name, the wife of Rabbi Eliezer of Worms, one of the big Ashkenazi rabbis from the more conservative camps. She also was a famous Torah teacher. I told you this last week, but I wanted to read it to you. There was a Rabbi Shmuel Barzani. There's a book I just bought recently. Many of the Sephardic rabbis from around the world. I have a 4-volume encyclopedia there of over 7,000 Sephardic rabbis' names. But this is a more abridged version. It's got pictures, things like that. It's not an encyclopedia. And it has here about the Jews of Kurdistan. Now, I'll tell you, I'm not going to lie to you, but until recently, I didn't know anything about the rabbis of Kurdistan. The Jews, I didn't know much about this community. But he says here there was a rabbi named Rabbi Shmuel Barzani. He was the son of Rabbi Netanel Halevy, and he lived in the early 1600s. And he started one of the greatest yeshivas in that region of the world. Bito shel Rabbi Shmuel Barzani, Osnat, his daughter Osnat, Nasa Rabbi Yaakov bar Yehuda Mizrahi. She married a rabbi called Rabbi Yaakov, the son of Yehuda Mizrahi. He עצמה הייתה בעלת ידיעות רבות בתורה. She knew a lot of Torah. כשנפטר רב שמואל ברזני, when her father passed away, עבר רב יעקב בעלה של אסנת לשמש ברבנות מוצול. Her husband became the rabbi of the community. לאחר פטירתו, and when her husband passed away, עמדה היא במקומו. She replaced him in his position. בתפקיד ראש הישיבה ולימדה תלמוד. She became the Rosh Yeshiva and she taught Talmud to the community. That was her job. This is in Kurdistan. What I want to show you here is that none of these people were controversial. Maybe a little bit. But none of them were excommunicated. None of them were thrown out of the community. All of them were perceived as very sincere individuals who really wanted to do good for the Jewish people and do good for the people they were helping. I'm more than happy that next week we should open up a can of worms about ladies being rabbis, about can it be okay, not to be okay. That's for next week. I'm happy to have the discussion, but next week someone has to bring it up though, at the beginning of next week's class. What has to be said though is the following. This didn't come from any outside ideology that was affecting Judaism. It wasn't that there was a women's suffrage movement in the 1600s in Kurdistan. I promise you, Kurdistan probably still hasn't had a women's suffrage movement. Agree with me on this? The Kurds, as much as now everyone wants to help the Kurds are not such. Okay, but it was a natural way of life that the rabbi passed away, his son-in-law took over. The son-in-law passed away. There was no rabbi to fit that position. The best candidate was his wife. So why wouldn't she fill that position? See, if it comes out of an act of rebellion, if it's an act of feminism, if it's an act to make a point, so then you will be treated as a person who's coming to make a point. And people don't often like when you make points to them, for whatever agenda it is. But when it comes as the natural way that the community works, that ladies and men are both competent individuals, and they both have leadership roles in their own rights. And sometimes those roles are switched, and sometimes this one is the Rosh Yeshiva and this one is the student, and nobody should bat an eyelid from those things. I don't know why they don't teach these things in seminary. It could be they're afraid. Could be they're afraid to open up next week's can of worms. Could be that it's just not an accepted norm today. But I'll tell you the truth, it's not okay that it's not an accepted norm. It's not okay because there are people who have what to give. and they should be allowed to give. But again, it has to come, and there's no meter of, l'shem shamayim, of is this for the sake of heaven. There are rabbis that become rabbis, so when they walk into their room, people will stand up for them. Guaranteed. The Rambam already writes about it. They had no great intentions when they were studying in yeshiva. Learning Torah was easy for them. They knew that they were going to be able to make a little bit of money. They wouldn't have to work so hard. And people would stand up for them when they come to a wedding or come to a room, and they'd kiss their hands and so on and so forth. And that was a great way of life. And there are people who became rabbis because that was their calling in life. That was their purpose in life. And that was their mission. And just like the Jewish community helped that happen, there should be, I don't care if it's called a rabbi or it's called something else, but an equal partnership that's called, could be a rabbinit, it could be whatever word you want to call it, but it's a lady that also has, being a rabbi, my main part of my job is not reading from the Torah, it's not leading services, that's 3% of what it is that I do. The 97% that a lady can do, she can do. I'm not here telling you, so now she's going to be a leader, she's going to start reading the Torah. You don't have to do it all, it doesn't all have to happen as a package deal. But I'm saying, Baruch Hashem, we do find in the Jewish communities, even this model of a rabbi and a rebbitzin working together, which is the norm in most communities in the world. I'll give it to the Orthodox community. That's it's a very recent development. Not so recent, but pretty recent. And it's a very good development. It shows that there's a way that two people do the same job but complement each other because they can do things the other one can't do. And that's a beautiful thing. So now, how do you have a rabbanit who doesn't have to be married to a rabbi to be a rabbinit? It's an interesting question. We'll open up this can of worms next week. But what I wanted to point out here, this is not a new age phenomenon what Rabbi Uziel is bringing. He's just saying some people went to an extreme. And he said, I promise you that if you dig back far enough in Europe, you'll find similar people. Just dig back far enough. Look for the right people. Look for people who didn't do it out of an ideology, didn't do it out of a rebellion, didn't do it to be renegades. They did it because they felt that was the natural way that Torah worked.
Just very quick, and maybe for next week, but what was Rabbi Kook's point of view? I mean, I am sure that Rabbi Kook also accepted these women.
I don't think, and there could be rare instances where this was unfortunately non-Jewish influence, but there are very rare occurrences in the Jewish community where ladies were not accepted as equal people.
Yeah.
The question here is not whether you're accepted as an equal person, but rather whether you can be accepted as a leader, as a judge, as a rabbi, as the Rosh Yeshiva, as whatever it would be.
But they were accepted.
They were. And what that meant was that they were very genuine and their community was very genuine. But unfortunately, genuinity is not coming out of the trees today. People are, I don't know, it's hard to find. It's a hard thing to find.
I agree.
And, it could be that there are people in the world who are very learned Torah scholars, that are ladies that are teaching Torah. There are seminaries in Israel, like I told you. You have ladies who are writing books that are not just, books on halakha, books on chumash, look at our bookcases, you'll find them.
When did Rabbi Kook pass?
In 1935. Yeah. I thought it was 33 or 39.
And
35.
And in 1960?
Rabbi Uziel later. Rabbi Uziel passed away after the founding of the city. 53?
The reverse.
I have Rabbi Uziel's last will and testament.
You do?
I have it. I found a copy online. You can print it out. It's 8 pages. It's a short thing. Maybe it's something to do next week. And it's a beautiful piece. His wishes for the Jewish people to just figure themselves out, get along with each other, realize the good in the world. There's certain things that was very special about him. Both of these characters, Rav Kook and Rav Uziel, were special people. I'm not here to tell you Rav Uziel is right, Rav Kook is wrong. There are times I disagree with Rav Uziel, certain things that I've seen in his writings. There are times where I agree very much with Rav Kook. The truth doesn't ever come from one place. The truth comes from many places. And even those people who are of different opinions would be truthful enough to share with you that same opinion.
I wonder how much un-Jewish influence there was on Judaism, which kind of separated men and women in a way.
That's what my wife was saying. Much of Judaism today is reactionary. Why don't we do this? Oh, because the Reform people. What is that? Why don't we do that? Oh, because in the Christian churches. What does it have to do with anything? I'm Jewish. What am I doing? Why am I making calculations with other people?
If you live in Europe or at a certain time, there were norms. You can't, just like in Borough Park you wear skirts, there are norms.
You want to hear a great example? Great example of reactionary Judaism. How do you say a shul in Yiddish? It's not a shul. What is another word for a shul? A shtibel. What does a shtibel mean?
A living room.
It's a little room. It's a tiny little place.
What do they call the top of a church?
A steeple.
Oh no.
Very, very quickly. In the Shulchan Aruch it says the synagogue has to be the tallest building in the whole town. That's a rule. It's a halakha. You can't have a house that's taller than the synagogue. And unfortunately, we don't. Today, you just buy land wherever you have it. But I remember in Baltimore, they built the yeshiva. They have on top, it's like a hill. The top of the hill is the yeshiva, and the dorms are around it. So what do you do when you have a shul that's over here and people want to build it? So you make a steeple on top of the shul. It goes as tall as you need it to go, and then the shul is still the tallest building in town. What happened was Christians started adopting this method of building churches. They called them steeples. And so Jews decided to stop building steeples so you wouldn't confuse the synagogue with the church. Reactionary Judaism. Jewish custom, if you look in halachic texts, is when a couple, a bride and a groom, walk down the aisle towards the chuppah, you throw rice at them. The reason for this custom is because rice, it symbolizes being fruitful and multiplied. There's a lot of it, you can't count it, and you're giving them abundant blessings. That's an ancient Jewish custom. So why don't Jews throw rice anymore? Why are we throwing sun-kissed candies at the bar mitzvah boy? Because the Christians took that custom, and so we don't do it anymore.
But hang on, walking down or coming back? Coming back after the ceremony.
I don't know, either way. Whenever we throw... After, okay. Fine.
Of course we throw.
Now, when it...
What do you throw before?
Well, I want to just finish this. I want to finish this. What my wife pointed out was very correct. Reactionary Judaism, it existed for a purpose, but it cannot be the Judaism that's going to take us forward. It's a Judaism that's going to lock us down and hold us back. And sometimes those were good things. Sometimes we have to react to things that we're not reacting properly to and change the other reactions. That's what we're going to figure out together. That's why this class is here. Last week I spoke to Devorah and I said, maybe the title of this class, I'll say that website is crashed. Our relationships website. I've called them. I've left them messages. I've sent them emails. Clearly, they fill out all the world's problems in relationships. Until then, I think we're not changing the name of the class officially. Relationships was a relationships class. I think this should be like a current Jewish issues kind of class. We talk about some really nice things here, some really deep things here. I appreciate your company very much, the sharpness of your minds, the passion in your hearts, and I think that we can come to a lot of truth from this class. And I don't know what we'll be learning next week, but if someone opens up the can of worms at the beginning, we'll do it. Hopefully I'll bring some other text material.
That is a very good person to start.
Issues.
Everybody
has
Everyone should have a beautiful week.